Hello, my friend. On today's episode, I'm with Ben Pickard, and we are talking about your marketing and sales funnel. Specifically, we're talking about an approach to your marketing and sales funnel that we like to call selling the next step. And this is a simplified way of thinking about how do you move people, how do you move leads through your marketing and sales funnel in the most effective way to generate a sale. And so if you want to simplify the way you think about your marketing and sales funnel, this is a great episode for you. Keep on listening. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business Unicorns podcast. Before we jump in, I want to give you all a quick reminder that we are going to Toronto for our twice annual Unicorn Society retreat. We're going March 21st and 22nd, and you are invited. It's all of our Unicorn Society community coming together to talk about marketing and sales for 2 whole brilliant days. And we let in a few folks who are not Unicorn Society members. I think we only have a handful of spots left as of recording this. And so if you want to come join us in Toronto for 2 whole days of magic and merriment and friendshipping and learning and leveling up your gym when it comes to marketing and sales, go over to Instagram and DM us the word Toronto. We'll send you all the information you need to join us. And I hope to see you there. Ben, I know you love our retreats and you're a Canadian. So what's your pitch for getting people to come to Toronto?
Like, bring your plaid, bring your Timmies, get some maple syrup. I'm just kidding. Although a lot of that is. But, yeah, this is the first time BFU's done an event in Canada since inception, I believe.
Yeah.
And like I said before, if you're American, your dollar is incredibly good in Canada right now. And if you're Canadian, like, you don't have to fly out of the country. You get to come hang out. Toronto's a really cool city. We're always balancing friendshipping with learning, with workshopping. Like,
yep.
Even if you have no interest in joining Unicorn Society at all, that's totally fine. But like, come for an awesome day with awesome people. You're going to leave inspired with tons of action steps that'll give you more money, more impact, more freedom.
Yeah. Well said, my friend. Great pitch. And I do plan to leave with some Canadian souvenirs, like some maple syrup. So how have you been, Mr. Pickard? How's your 2025 going so far?
My 2025 is going awesome. I was talking to you about this off air. I've just committed to being more ruthless with my calendar. Not like so much saying no to stuff, but really just doing what I said I was going to do when I said I was going to do it.
Yeah.
Including factoring in planning fallacy. So if I think it's going to take an hour, I put it in my calendar for an hour and a half. And that's also carried over. Like, my workouts are going great. For the fitness nerds out there, I'm doing 5-3-1 and loving it. I'm just feeling like really on top of shit. I'm not like a resolutions person, but
Yep.
Kat and I do a quarterly deep dive into like our life happiness. And one of the things that was standing out for me is that, like, I think I was just wasting more time than I thought I was. Everything was still getting done, but if I can do it in 10% less time, that's 10% more family and fun.
Love that.
Not
Yeah.
work is fun. You know what I mean, though?
Yeah, but still, yeah. So other things you want to spend time on. Good for you. I think, while I also am not a resolutions person, I do believe in like hitting the reset button once in a while. Right. And I think that, I know we talked about this before, but, my routine is about once a quarter, I look at my calendar and say, like, how am I spending my time? Is the way I'm spending my time aligning with the things that are on my plate right now, what my priorities are right now, what my goals are right now. And the fact that, you're doing that at the start of this year is fantastic. And it seems like you're already finding ways to just get more ruthless and efficient. So good for you.
How is your 2025, Michael? You ask everybody because you always host, but we want to know about how's Michael doing?
Yeah, my 2025 has been great. I think I mentioned this maybe on a previous episode with Fisher, but I'm, focused a little more on my health this year. Again, not a New Year's resolution, but just kind of like a reset button now that I'm in my late 40s. And so, a birthday will have that effect on you sometimes. That's been really great. And also just, I don't talk about a lot on this podcast, but, I'm still a student. So I think, this year I'm also focused on, really trying to reorient myself to my schoolwork so I can actually finish someday. Being a PhD student is something that can linger for years and years and years. And I don't mind, I'm not in a rush, right? But also, like, I do want to finish one day. And so, so that's something else that's been on my mind at the start of this year. And I'm ready to make some real progress. And I'm sure you'll all be hearing about it on this podcast. But yeah. Thanks for asking, my friend. Well, let's dive into today's topic. And today's topic is really about sales and lead follow-up. Excuse me, coughing. And I'm going to let you introduce this topic because it's something that you've been thinking a lot about and you're really good at. And I know you're going to be actually presenting at our Toronto retreat. So, tell me a little bit about how would you set up this topic?
Um, I'm gonna set it up with directness.
Great.
This podcast is to convince you, dear listener, that you should only sell the next step. And we're going to tell you more about what that means, but you do not sell a membership off an email when a lead comes through. You are selling the next step in your process. And we just want to move people down the funnel or along the flow chart if you think in whiteboards like I do. And we're just trying to get there from A to B and B to C and C to D. You do not go from wherever you live to our Toronto retreat. You go through a series of steps that include drive to the airport, park. You get the idea.
Yeah.
And we're going to dive into like, how do we only sell the next step, which will actually increase your sales and conversion.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I'll maybe use an analogy to set it up as well, which is, when I think about, finding and attracting and getting a commitment from brand new clients, it's a start of a relationship. Right. And all relationships have this period of like maybe a little awkwardness at first. And it takes time to develop like trust and rapport and candor. It doesn't happen overnight. And when you think about like an actual dating analogy, I haven't dated in a long time. So for all you youngins out there, maybe it doesn't work like this anymore, but it used to work like, that oftentimes, not always, that you would start slowly with a date. You'd meet someone during the daytime for coffee, and then maybe you'd, meet up with them a little later for dinner and spend more time together, et cetera, et cetera. And you go slow to build trust or rapport, to feel safe with the person, to feel like you trust them. The same is true for your marketing and sales funnel, that you have to incrementally ask a little bit more from the next person, ask a little bit more from the person, till eventually they know you, they like you, they trust you, they buy from you, right? And they hopefully stay with you for a long time and convince other people to do the same, right? But I think the point that Ben's going to make here in this podcast is you can't go from meeting someone for the first time to expecting them to be your best friend the next day, to asking them for marriage on the second date, right? I think you have to go slow and get them to commit to just the next step, just the next date, the next thing you want them to do. And when you think about a sales and marketing funnel like that, it becomes less overwhelming, becomes less daunting, and you start to like meet your leads where they're at. You get to meet them where they're at and slowly bring them on to the next level. That's not to say that from time to time you can't find a super cold lead who kind of wants to buy immediately. That can happen, right? People Google you and just move to town and they're ready to buy even though they never heard of you before. That'll happen from time to time, but more times than not, especially when you have a lot of lead flow through things like paid digital advertising, you're going to have pretty fucking cold leads who need this period of warm up. And so Ben's going to talk through how to do that by just selling them on the next step. And so let's talk about the first step. So let's just imagine that first scenario, that scenario I just mentioned. So I'm doing some really cold paid ads out there. Someone, clicks on a link. What am I asking them for? What's the first step I want to sell people on?
Yeah, that's perfect. So I would argue for 80 to 90% of gyms out there, the first step should be a quick get to know you call, which we call a discovery call. Now, there will be, I'm going to put caveats on this, that like if your trial is $0, maybe you can skip this step. But even then, I think it's still worthwhile building rapport and getting to know the person. It just makes the rest of your life so much easier. All you're trying to do is get them to get on a quick call with you. You can make it clear. Don't bring your credit card. No commitment required. Like say what you need to say to really like polish this, but you just want to get on the call to be like, hey, Michael, it's Ben from ABC Gym. Like, thanks so much for your time today. Can you tell me a little bit about your fitness goals? What makes that important to you? Any aches or pains we need to know about?
Yep.
And from a sales perspective, well, there's two aspects to this. One is you're building the relationship, which we're all in this relationship business because at least a part of us really enjoys that process. And if you're doing sales, you're also trying to like hit some sort of a goal. So from a relationship standpoint, you're building trust faster and you're serving it at your community and you're making an impact faster and easier. From a sales perspective, they are feeding you ammunition the whole time, which you can then use to sell your services. When they say they've had a bad experience with other trainers before, or they haven't done anything for a decade, or they used to be with X Sports Performance Gym, but it wasn't working and their kid got slower, let's just say, that lets you know what are the things that they care about that you can highlight further down the process or even on that call. When someone's like, I'm really scared of the gym, I find it really overwhelming, I can be like, great. Like a lot of our clients have said the same thing. That's why our approach is to do this in a way that isn't overwhelming, for your lifestyle. We want to make it fit with your lifestyle because your gym offers a whole bunch of value. Maybe it's distinct, like you've got nutrition and you've got group classes and one-on-one, and you do some sort of accountability check-in thing, and you do events, and they get t-shirts and you sell protein. Any client isn't going to want all that shit. Some of them, the value proposition is, you're nice people and you're 1 minute from my house. But if you don't know what they're actually looking for, you're basically just giving them like, when you go to like a Chinese food restaurant, at least that's the one I think of, there's like 10,000 options. The nice restaurants you go to are like too many menu items. You're confusing them. The nicest places are like chicken or fish. Great. Yeah. This is what we've got. So you're trying to figure out what do they care about, so you can highlight the stuff that they care about to build trust, build rapport, and like get them to the next step. Yeah. And you can't do that unless you have a discovery call. Otherwise, you're basically banking on whatever your landing page says is exactly what they want. And I mean this with love, but I've yet to meet too many fitness people who are world-class copywriters. Your landing page probably isn't going to sell it as well as you could on the phone.
Yeah, I think that those are such great points, right? There's people buy from people. And so they get on the phone with a person, they're starting to build a relationship. They see that you're a real flesh and blood human, not a robot. They see that you actually care and have some empathy and are curious about their life and their situation. All that goes a long way to building trust and rapport and connection. And from there, they're willing to try something out, right? I think that's great. Let me just talk about the mechanics of that. So let's just assume that this lead came from somewhere online, right? Either they Googled you or, so just talk about the mechanics of how do you get someone actually to commit to a discovery call as a first step?
Yeah, well, two aspects, and both of them involve kind of the same stuff. So the first one is the next step is a link for them to book in with you. And if you use a software like Go High Level through, Kilo, like it's easy to do and it's in there. But you could also set up a Calendly account, which I think you get one option for free anyway, so it costs nothing. But regardless, most of it happens through a ton of follow-up. So generally speaking, you want to follow up more aggressively than you think you should for the first week, and then still pretty aggressively for the second week. So an example of that would be like 2 calls a day with a follow-up text for the first week, and a call every second day with emails in between for the second week. Because you do want to strike when the iron's hot, especially for this example, if they're coming from paid ads. But the point here is you're not selling them a membership. All you're saying is like, hey, thanks so much for your interest in our gym. Super excited. The next step in our process is for me to learn a little bit about your goals to make sure this is actually a good fit where we can help you. Hop on click this link to book a discovery call, like no credit card required, no pressure. You can even like further reduce risk by being like, and if we're not the right fit, we will find you somewhere that is. Yeah. But the language is kind of beside the point, I guess, but you're really just pushing for like, here's the benefit of getting on this call. We're doing it so that to help you make the right choice. We're doing it to make sure it's a good fit. All the questions you have, because our pricing may or may not be on our website, gets covered on this call. You haven't even talked about membership options. You haven't even talked about commitments. You haven't talked about pricing. It's just, let's make sure this is the right fitness home for you, Michael.
That's great. Great. So the first step we're selling when people come to our website, people come to into our DMs, when people find us in any way, is just get them on a call. Just get them on a call to talk about their goals and what they want and try to make a connection human to human. And then once we're on that call, what is the next step we're selling them into, Ben?
The next step is usually coming in for an in-person consultation. Maybe you do it over Zoom, but in-person is probably the best for most of you. We've gone through the call. I know what your goals are. I know what your hesitations are. I've qualified you that like you want to exercise during our business hours and price point is like in the right ballpark. The next step is like, great. Why don't we come in to do a consultation? You might call it a strategy session, movement assessment, whatever, to come in and we're going to go through a bit more information, do a movement assessment and like talk membership options. So like that's the equivalent of you've gone on a coffee date and you're both like, neither of you are creepers. Cool. Yeah. Let's do dinner and we're going to spend like a couple hours together rather than 20 minutes.
I think it's great. And I think a lot of folks, especially sports performance folks, use this as a first step because often there'll be like a movement assessment or some sort of performance assessment that's part of this initial meeting. And there's other folks who also use this discovery call to sell people into a low barrier offer. But I think often on these discovery calls, you can sell people into a low barrier offer, which might include a first visit, like a consultation with, no strings attached, money back guarantee. But I think, ultimately the whole point here is that you want to find a very simple next thing for them to try. And the next thing they could try is just come in. We'll spend an hour together, and we'll do a little workout. We'll talk more about your goals. Or the next step could be like for $99. You can come try everything out that we do for 2 whole weeks, right? And that's a very easy ask. It's a very easy next step. Again, not talking about membership options. We're not talking about long-term commitment. We're not talking about marriage. We're not even talking about moving in together. We're just talking about come try us out for 1 visit for an hour or for 2 weeks, unlimited for under $100. Super easy ask. Yeah. Let's assume that they take us up on one of those. Then how do you get them to a next step?
Yeah, well, the next step would be either whether you've sold them the LBO on the discovery call or you did the in-person consultation. The next step is getting them to commit to that LBO.
Yep.
So that one is like, again, you're not talking membership options. You're just getting them to commit to that.
Yep.
The step after that is they do the thing.
Yeah.
Wow them. Give them an amazing experience. Make sure everything from like their program is customized if you do custom programs to at least the coaches know what their aches and pains are. So hey, Michael, I know it's your first workout. We're going to do this exercise. I know you got that bum knee. So just like, if anything feels weird, make sure you let me know.
Yeah.
It's that like, how do you make magic in that moment, which then leads you to a follow-up to sell an actual membership.
Yeah. I think that part is really important there. You just went over, which is the step after committing to a low barrier offer is getting them to show up, right? Getting them to the next step is show up and use it, right? We've all had the experience of someone buying like a $79, $99 low barrier offer and just like never even using it, never responding and just kind of ghosting, right? So there's some work to be done there to make sure that they actually show up and use the thing that they bought. Because we all know that the more they use it, the more they come to the gym and actually spend face time with us and our team and the rest of our clients, our community, the more likely they're going to be to convert to a membership, the more likely they're going to be to want to stay. The number one thing that Unicorn Society members tell us is just that they might not have enough leads, but they know once they get a lead to walk through the door, we can convert them. Right? People are very confident about being able to convert people once they actually walk in the door and spend time with them. But not all folks are going to be so easy to walk in the door and get them to show up. So getting them to actually show up is the next step. And then from there, as you said, Ben, the next step from that is really just selling them on the idea of sticking around. And so can you just walk through the mechanics of that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, so this will vary gym to gym depending how you do things. But my general recommendations would be ideally sit down for another meeting. Now, It may be kind of wonky and it's not like you're going to be able to be like, cool, our follow-up meeting to sell you another membership is going to be on this date, Michael. Let's book it 3 weeks in advance. This might look like you just happen to bump into them into the gym, 75% of the way through their trial offer.
Yeah.
Like, hey, how you liking things so far? Oh, that's great. I heard from the trainer that you were doing this thing, which that all has to be prepared in advance. So you're not just like showing up blind. And he's like, sounds like you're really loving it. When's a good time to talk options to continue? Because I know your trial ends on Friday. And then they're like, oh, I'm free now. Because oftentimes people are at the end of their session. But you're setting up that next meeting to get them to commit to something because they're going to have new obstacles. They're going to have new hesitations. Maybe the drive was longer than they thought it was because they're coming at peak rush hour time.
Yep.
If they want to make sure that there's a plan for them. But you're continuing to build that relationship so that you can address their obstacles like individually.
Yeah.
Now, there are gyms that might just automatically convert people, like the Netflix closed, that's fine. Maybe sports performance gyms, they sold the membership in that assessment, or maybe they have like a middle step of like an assessment's the LBO, a 1-month trial, then an ongoing thing. But I can't see, unless you're doing like crazy high volume, I can't see a downside to building more trust. Because then when things come up, they're not like, oh, I'm busy, I'm going to quit, see ya. The person's like, hey, I'm getting kind of busy. Can we talk? I'm like, absolutely, we can talk.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're on the right track here. I'll maybe be a little bit more of a hard ass than you and say, for most of you out there who are going to sell people into an LBO, a low barrier offer, I do recommend actually scheduling this conversation if you can make it work. I know it's not always possible and not everyone's going to be able to do it, but I really recommend that if someone's starting a 2-week thing, we will say to them, okay, in week 2, we have a strategy session for you or a success session for you or, whatever the case may be, a growth plan session for you. And then week 2, we will schedule time for us to meet again to talk about how's it going? How do you like things? What's working for you? What's not working for you? And it's very easy to build value for that conversation because you're going to say, I want to make sure that we're a good fit in the second week. So once you've been coming 3-4 times, we're going to schedule a 15-minute conversation during one of your visits. And if you can schedule it, great. If not, Ben's absolutely right. You want to try and purposely run into them and find them before and after their session to have this conversation. But when it's scheduled, they come with that mindset of being ready to share. They come with that mindset of ready to sit down and not run out the door. And I think that lends itself to just a more useful conversation. But I would acknowledge it's not going to be possible for everyone.
No, you make a good point. There's definitely a level of preparedness and setting expectations that you want to happen. And as a backup, like you're going to bump into them after their 9 a.m. session very intentionally.
100%. There's got to be another conversation to convert them, like you said, unless you're doing like a Netflix close, which is basically like this low barrier offer rolls into a monthly cancel anytime membership or a 3-month membership. I think it's a really great option. I see more and more, Coinciding members actually doing what we call a Netflix close, which is, frankly, we need to stop using Netflix. I think they were one of the first, but almost every app that you download these days has like a 7-day free trial, which automatically rolls into a $19 a day plan. And so I think, that's the whole point, is that so many consumers these days are used to the idea of I try something out for cheap or free, and then it automatically becomes the thing I pay for every single month. Yeah. So I think a lot of gyms should try that if you haven't and see how the Netflix close works for you. The benefit to it, like we mentioned, is it might be less important for you to do this touch base in week 2 of a trial, let's say, but or a low barrier offer. But it's still, to Ben's point, really useful to have that FaceTime with new clients early on to build that relationship and that trust so they know that you're there really to support them. Yeah.
For what it's worth, we do the Netflix close and we still do a follow-up meeting. It's sometimes, again, that meeting is like a sit down 30 minutes negotiation, so to speak. Sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm loving this. I'm good to keep going with the thing I'm doing. And you're like, yes, we don't need them to actually sign anything. They signed that all for our process earlier, but there's still like a mental checkbox we want to check of like, Sally's going to keep going. We need to find it.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, I think we covered most of the marketing and sales funnel during this conversation. And so the whole point you were making here, Ben, was, don't worry about selling people a membership right off the bat. In fact, there's lots of steps to getting to the place where they're going to commit long-term or even short-term to an actual membership. Just focus on getting people to the next step from where they're at. Anything else you want to say to folks, or just, any advice for folks who are maybe just doing this for the first time?
Yeah. By defining what the steps you want to take people through are, because they might be, slightly different than the framework we outlined, you can then make all the actions downstream of what the outcome you're looking for is. Mm-hmm. So sometimes there's a question of like, oh, what script do you use for this? Or what do you use for that? And those are all like totally fine questions. But if you know your next step is a discovery call, and then the step after that is in person, the next step after that is a conversion meeting with a better name, all the actions serve the next step in each, I'm thinking of a flow chart here. So rather than like, oh, we should do this because this other cool gym does it, you're like, wait, what is our process and what's the best way to get them into that thing? So you're thinking from like a top-down approach, probably not that different than how you think about like, if someone's nutrition is totally fucked, where do you start?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to have an approach that you've developed in how to address that, whether you've written it down or not. I want you to think about your sales process the same way, that it's not a bunch of stuff you do. It's what do you do to get them to the next step with the least amount of friction.
Yeah, I think that's the analogy I often use for processes like this, because everyone knows them, is like a cooking recipe, right? There's a reason why many of us still follow recipes for things, because hundreds, if not thousands of millions of people have made this thing we want to make before. And there's evidence that doing it in this order, in this way, yields the best results. And so you want to think, okay, what are the steps I sell people on, in what order, in what ways, that yields the best results? And you'll continue to tweak that over time until you have a recipe that makes like your perfect chocolate cake, right? But ultimately, you're probably not going to start by throwing your flour in the oven, right? Like that's not going to actually get you the best cake. For any bakers out there know that that's absurd, right? But you get the idea, right? Your point here, Ben, is that like it's a process that it builds on itself, right? That one ask flows into the next ask, flows into the next ask, and you're just getting them to the next step. In the same way that you follow a kind of recipe step by step, you're making this process for your gym. And I think that that's a really great way of thinking about it. All right, friends. Well, thanks for the great conversation, Mr. Pickard. It was so fun to talk about this. I think it's a great kind of a mantra, a model, a great framework for people to think through in terms of just staying focused on selling people on the next step. I think there's there's a lot of simplicity that comes with this way of thinking. So I really appreciate you bringing it to the podcast.
Thank you.
And friends, if you want more brilliance by Ben Pickard and the rest of our team, come join us in Toronto, March 21st and 22nd. Go over to Instagram, DM us the word Toronto. The link to our Instagram is down below in the show notes. Come see us 2 whole days. I think by the time this podcast comes out, maybe we'll have 2 or 3 spots left. So don't waste any time. Go click the link and let us know if you want to come. We'll give you all the information. Thanks, Ben. See you on the next one.
Thank you.